So, I'm going to talk very much from the point of view of what kind of environment we provide for our students. In the postgraduate sector, I will focus in some cases on doctoral research and doctoral studies, but in fact we all know that we don't only have doctoral students in our system. But what do we mean, a research-rich environment for postgraduates? Well, this is about enabling postgraduate education, and there is the institutional context. There's the consideration of a university being research-intensive or not. I'll get to more of that. That's about the research culture and the community in the university and the disciplines and the resources that are available. And then there's a whole lot of expectations that the student has, the supervisor has, the faculty has, the people who are paying, the sponsors, and the public have enormous expectations of what it is we're going to provide, and not only for our students, but for the whole of society. And there's expectations around academic excellence. I won't list them all, I know you know most of them, but broadly what we're trying to do, or what we say we're trying to do, is to prepare global citizens who will take new knowledge into the world. So Sue did outline the national context. We do have the national priority of doctoral education. We have those various aspects of our ecosystem, that studies which have been done over the years. I'll mention one or two of them. And then, of course, the DHET's priorities around increasing the number of doctoral graduates. You've seen also the pictures of this doctoral degrees review. Quite a lot of what I'm going to say is, in fact, comes from the recommendations of that review. And I think it's a very important document that we should be thinking about, not only in terms of the broad spectrum, but in fact the research part of it. This also what I'm going to talk about comes from a project which I have been involved in, the Advancing Early Careers Researchers and Scholars Program. You can see our nice new banner. But that is founded on other studies which go back as far as 2018, 2016. So we've been talking about all of this for a long time. We had this project of implementing the outcomes of those studies, and we made recommendations about what did we need to do. And then we started this program. So some of that is this. First of all, if we're going to talk about postgraduate environments and research, we must think about what we mean by success. How will we know when we've got there? So for research-intensive universities, they tend to measure according to quite firm metrics, like how many postgraduates have you got in comparison with undergraduates, and how many PhDs do you graduate every year, and how many staff have got PhDs. These are hard metrics. And we think about that as the context for success of a research-intensive university. And then we look at other indicators of postgraduate success, and we talk about graduation rates or completion times, as Sue said. But we really need to be asking ourselves, what's quality? What's employability? And what is the in-depth learning experience? And there's a reason for that. If we talk about the purpose of a doctoral degree, we say, and this comes straight out of the national standard for a doctoral degree, for which I take responsibility, but we say an original, innovative contribution that contributes to new knowledge, frontiers of knowledge. And we say that a doctoral student is going to come out as an expert, master of their research methods and skills, and able to engage with what they're doing, and a high level of research capability. This is what we say we're going to give our students, right? When we consider what we assess with a doctoral student, we do look at the quality of the candidate, and we look at the doctoral program, if there is one, which there isn't always. We look at the supervisor's background and experience, and the graduate at the exit level, maybe with an oral examination. Of course, we look at the thesis and the outputs, the publications, and so on. But do we ask the candidates, how was that? How did you get on? And actually, I believe that we don't ask that question enough. So let's think also about the environment that the student is in a research situation. If the university is a research-intensive university, there will be a strong research culture, and there will be a university-wide academic community who are involved in research. And the postgraduates will be a part of that, and they should be right from the time they take on honours. And that should make it possible to be absolutely submerged or involved in a research community. And then when we look for excellence, we will be looking for the game-changing research, the international recognition, the fact that there are leading scholars taking a part in the research that the postgraduates are doing. We would be looking for the most talented students and looking for the most lucrative, if you like, the most high prestige funding. So that's what you might have in a research-intensive university, but not all of our universities are research-intensive in this way, because some of them are still developing. And how do you do that? How do you develop research intensity? You don't just turn a switch. There's got to be the ambition to do that. And it's very easy to say we want to be a research-intensive university. It's not the same thing to be one or just switch over to being one. You need research strengths and an academic community who are bought into that. And you need resources. I'll say that word a few times in this talk. You need facilities, research facilities, not just libraries. Well, libraries are critical, but more than that, you need, particularly for experimental projects, you need experimental facilities and so on. And you need partners. No university can go it alone and say, this year we're going to be research intensive and we're just going to do it ourselves. That doesn't happen. You need collaborations and partners and networks to help you to build. So that all comes down to having the vision of being research intensive and providing this rich research environment, knowing what that quality means, and having the resources. That's a tall order for a university that's developing research intensity. From the student's point of view, there's a context around where they come from, how prepared they are. One of the things that we heard so much in the doctoral degrees review input from all the universities was concern about the preparedness of our graduates from undergraduate into research programs. How they don't have the readiness in terms of their skills, their ability to work independently, all those things. And that means that it takes them longer to get going with their research. Of course, we need supervision. I'll talk more about that. But we also need to remember that our students come into this. 60% of South African postgraduate students are working part-time, at least. And only 40% or less are actually full-time students. So they're already under various kinds of pressure, and they're doing work other than their academic careers too. Then we ask them to study independently and plan their projects and communicate their results. And we think about quality in the words that we use, but we very seldom actually address it directly. The public sees it. The public see when we have things like people reporting that they have degrees that turn out to be fraudulent, that the student who comes, or the graduate who comes with a doctorate actually doesn't know how to write or how to do the research and so on. So we don't actually link all of this together into one story. What are we asking them to do? Well, as I've said, we say they must learn to study and plan their research projects and do it, and then communicate it through the various vehicles that we have. And then we also say, as a doctoral student, you must establish a publication record, you must become internationally known, you must be a part of a team of collaborators, and plan a career path maybe if you're going to be an academic, which means you kind of need a brains trust to help you, and you need to build that international network. And this we ask in 3 years. So the challenges are there. There's the completion times and the graduation rates and the funding. There's supervision capacity, and there's the preparedness of our students. But there's also the issues that students highlight about not knowing how to plan and manage their research, and not knowing what kind of methodology they should be using, or even what methodology means. And there's issues around feeling isolated, which Sue has spoken about, and various personal problems that come up. What we probably need to be thinking much more about for that environment that they need is the supervisory relationships and how we manage those. Sue said quite a lot about that, but also the processes and the progress that they go through during this study. And how do we monitor that? So let's just look at completion time as being just an efficiency measure. And that's all it is. It's for the university to measure. But that's not really what the students are most concerned about. A lot of them don't complete their degrees at all. We did a survey at my own institution, and then we took a lot of data from the doctoral degrees review about why students don't finish, why they stop. And quite a lot of it came down to supervision problems, not enough time and attention from the supervisor leaving and then the student being left in the lurch and so on, funding, needing to live and eat, and then the underpreparedness. But students also said there were huge practical issues around things like accommodation and employment that they needed, because not just part-time now, but in future. And then the expectations around what they could do, workload-wise, a lack of administrative support. Students who don't even know where their student administration for postgraduates is. Where, does it sit in your admin? Does it sit in your research office? Do you have a center for postgrad studies? And then, of course, the personal issues. So when we say to postgraduate students, what do you need? Supervision is the first thing that comes up. And in this country, we know that we have a supervisory deficit anyway. We don't have enough supervisors. I won't read all of this to you, but we need much more capacity to train supervisors. And when we talked to supervisors who were kind of novice or just learning this kind of thing, many of them said they didn't feel that they had had enough training and had enough confidence and competence to be really good supervisors. So that's the first red flag, and it's one which I know we try to address. Mentorship. I'll talk a bit more about mentorship in a minute, but mentorship applies to everybody. It doesn't only apply to our students. It applies to the supervisors, it applies to the academics, it applies to people like us. Mentorship is a really important thing. It's your brain's trust, as I said, and it really is something that will enhance an institutional culture if people feel that they have others to talk to. And we do really have a shortage, particularly of Black South African mentors. And then the networking opportunities. Just because they're students doesn't mean they don't need to be collaborating and talking to people other than their supervisors. Supervision. I won't harp on all of this. I think we in this room probably are quite well aware of what supervision requires. But we really do need to have a focus on adequate supervision. And we have some mechanisms already in place, like the NGAP and early career researcher programs, and this one that I'm doing for USAP. And we need staff who have doctorates. And then there's all the smarter ways of supervising, which I won't go into because Sue did. But there's another factor that I think is really important, and that is that we need to think about the load, the supervisory load on our staff members, our academics, because it can become enormous, and it's not necessarily well managed, especially for relatively new academics who are allocated students to supervise. And then they end up with far too many and not enough capacity to manage their own load. And that was something that also came up in the doctoral degrees review. So what are we going to do? What are the approaches that we can take? Well, that conducive academic environment is about thinking about the scope and expectations when we think about completion times, and looking at the supervisory strengths and where are they, and monitoring that. Not just talking about it, but actually having a finger on that pulse. Planning for recruiting the right students, not asking students to enroll if they are not appropriately trained, not interested, not really wanting to do that program, and supporting their choices. And then recognizing them as emerging scholars, incorporating them into our community, our academic community, seeing them as part of what we are doing in our research as an institution, and of course fostering their development. So if we take that student-centered approach, we do need to build those capabilities that the postgraduates need, And I highlighted two here, particularly because of talking about the environment. One is helping them with planning research and managing that research. Not just saying, as you said, do all those approvals things and then just write your thesis. There's a whole planning process in there that not many students actually feel confident about. And then there's the more flexible support and making sure that students feel that they have an inclusive environment and an atmosphere where they are comfortable and confident to ask for help. So this is a kind of a summary of all that. There's academic support programs, many of us have them in our institutions. There's the need for advisory help, direction for things which are not necessarily straight academic, but things about how to behave, how to access assistance, and so on. There's issues around interdisciplinary skills, and there's the facilities that we need. And the bottom right, what's in red at the bottom of this, is all those actual facilities that we need to make sure are in place in that research environment. We've mentioned internationalization. It's a huge opportunity, especially when we talk about global citizens. We need to give our postgraduate students an opportunity to go and access the intellectual activities elsewhere, but also it's a great opportunity for students who need to access infrastructure. So a university that doesn't necessarily have it could access it internationally, and the students gain from that as well. I won't say much about postgraduate centres. Some of you here already run them, but I am a huge proponent of postgraduate centres where somebody wakes up every morning and worries about the postgraduates. And they can do a great deal to assist the postgraduates with all of these issues that are important to them and to give them that supportive environment. And then there's funding. I only need to say it once. Everybody in the room will nod their heads. It's an issue. We have in the Centre of Community of Practice a working group on postgraduate funding, and anybody who is interested in contributing or who has suggestions or ideas about how as a sector we might address funding for postgraduates, please talk to me. It's I think, one of our most overriding problems. Universities do have bursary plans, they're never adequate. We need to look at priority areas in order to use those. Then a couple of things I'm going to mention and not go into a lot of detail. One is we are still working post-COVID. We're doing a lot of stuff online. We're not thinking about some of the more difficult issues, and I highlight mentoring, ethics training, and science communication. All of these are things which will allow our students to conduct their work with integrity, but they tend to be either operationalized or ignored. So, mentorship, I won't read it again, but I say to postgraduates, find a mentor, find somebody who has a title like the one you'd like to have one day, somebody who can be an example to you, and then use that mentorship. Students have all sorts of different ideas about what they need, and mentors have a lot of wisdom to offer. Difference between mentoring and supervising is that the supervisor must be in the relevant field, but the mentor doesn't need to be. And I think that often adds breadth. Ethics and research integrity, we can talk about this for the rest of the afternoon, but I won't. The thing that I think is really important is the point that we're talking about research integrity and about the broad philosophical aspects of ethics, not just ethics approvals. So this is a big field, and it's about research integrity. And the information about how to get the approvals should be coming later. It's a huge issue. And then the science communication, well, we don't even really think about that most of the time, but we do want our students to be able to talk about their research. And maybe for some of them, the first time they get to do it is when they're actually reporting on their thesis or doing their research proposal. Science communication is critical to get the credibility from the public and the trust of the public. So again, it's something that we should be thinking about. And then a couple of other small things. Research data management, it's really easy to talk about research data, but the data belongs to other people, to other organizations, and students need to know how to be responsible about their research data. And then it comes back to research integrity, using data appropriately and winning public trust. And then there's a few other things like transdisciplinary research. We need to think about how we train our students. We talk about it, it's a lovely thing to think about. But it's changed what we do and how we do research. And we really need to be thinking about how we train our students to deal with that. Across disciplines, across boundaries, embracing complexity. These are issues which we probably don't really think about. Artificial intelligence, I'm only going to put this up here for now. Next week, if you're coming to the CHE Higher Education Conference, I'm talking about that next week, so I'm not going to talk about it now. But there's a lot to be said about artificial intelligences and how we might do them. And the point is that our postgraduates need to tread that very fine line between using AI and maintaining authenticity. So our students are going to need to learn to write and to manage all of that. And AI won't replace supervisors and teachers, but we do need guidelines and protocols and frameworks and systems to manage AI. Enough said. There's a lot to be said. Very broadly, and finally, we are looking at this as a sector. We're not really looking at it as individuals or individual institutions, and that's why this meeting. We need to be thinking about focusing as a sector on postgraduate education and having a community who think about scholarship and practice and what it means for our postgraduates. So, and sharing. You know, we have a lot of expertise between us, but we don't do a lot of sharing. And I think there are some very holistic approaches that we should be taking and advocating for as a sector. So very finally, I just want to say we do have a community of practice which USAF supports, community of practice in postgraduate education and scholarship, which some of you know about, and I'll be happy to tell you more offline if you like. We also do have in the program systems for monitoring academic support success. We have the community of practice. We have TUSO Resources, which is an online open access set of resources for early career academics at postgraduates. And we have TUSO Connect, which is an online free open mentoring program. So my last invitation is for you to have a look at those. They're all on the USAF website. And I think this is a place we can start to create a national enabling environment. Thank you.